If I ever run into you in the parking lot at Publix and don't immediately recognize you, please forgive me. It's not just that I'm still pretty new around here, though. Did I mention I've now made it through both Christmas and Easter? But there's something about seeing someone out of context that seems to play tricks on the mind. Like when you see someone you know from the gym over at the green market, or when you run into your accountant at the beach. But sometimes we never do make the connection until later in the day. We finally remember where we know that person from who looked so familiar to us. Oh, right! That's the woman who sits 3 pews in front of me every Sunday. Or around here, right! That's the social media influencer I've seen on Instagram. This story of Jesus and the 2 disciples traveling on the road to Emmaus is predicated on the fact that the 2 men didn't immediately recognize their traveling companion. We hear that their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Only Jesus had been wearing his Bethesda name tag. But at one level, you can't blame them. Jesus was, after all, supposedly dead. The disciples were blinded by their profound and utter grief. They were demoralized, disappointed, dejected. Their hopes were dashed. Everything they had believed about the one who was to redeem Israel had not come to pass. Their lives were turned completely upside down, and they failed to recognize the stranger who joined them on their journey to Emmaus on the afternoon of that very first Easter day. But Jesus doesn't get indignant or angry with them. He doesn't grab them by the lapels and shake them and say, "Hello, it's me." Rather, he just keeps walking with them and talking with them. At one point, we hear that beginning with Moses and all the prophets, Jesus interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. Now, that must have been one heck of a Bible study. But this story always reminds me of the times in our own lives when we are utterly convinced that God is nowhere to be found. Times when we feel lost or lonely or abandoned. This doesn't necessarily mean that we've lost our faith or lost our way, but there are times and circumstances and situations when we simply can't see or feel the divine presence in our lives. And those are hard moments. Like those 2 disciples walking along the road, we start to question what's real and what we know to be true. I'll say this about those moments. They are often when Jesus is most fully present with us, walking with us, encouraging us, loving us, even when we don't recognize him, even when we are blind to his presence. And I, for one, take great solace in this. The other truth is that so often it is only in retrospect that we recognize God's hand at work. I've often questioned where God was or what the heck God was doing at particularly challenging times in my own life, and I know I'm not alone. It's hard to see God when we're in physical or emotional pain, when a loved one dies, when things in your life don't go as you hoped, when a relationship fractures, And yet, so often, when we look back, we can see Jesus leading us through the pain, guiding us to new perspectives, opening our hearts to his love. Even when we can't see him in the midst of a particularly trying time, we can later see that he has led us on new or unexpected paths, or allowed us to experience God's love in unanticipated ways. The ongoing spiritual challenge is to see God at work in the present, not merely in retrospect. To migrate at least some of those moments of divine recognition to the here and now. To be reminded, even in confusing times, that Jesus is walking beside you. Like those two disciples walking along the road, you may not always be able to see him, but he is always able to see you. And we do well to remember this, even if it's after the fact. One of the things I think about sometimes is just how amazing it would have been to have lived in first century ancient Palestine. I mean, it would have had its challenges, like leprosy, lack of indoor plumbing, King Herod. But the opportunity to have actually met Jesus in the flesh is pretty compelling. Frankly, it's hard to read all these stories about him and not be at least a little jealous of the first followers of Jesus. But the Easter miracle is that coming face to face with the risen Christ is not limited to the first Christians, to the actual witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. It's not a matter of being in the right place at the right time. They're not luckier than those of us who follow him today or somehow more blessed. We, too, come face to face with the risen Christ. Jesus is made known to the disciples in the breaking of the bread, just as he is made known to us in the breaking of our communion bread. The presence of Christ transcends the experience of the first disciples. And what an incredible thing. We get to both know Jesus and have indoor plumbing. And I'm reminded of that great Celtic poem known as St. Patrick's Breastplate, words attributed to the saint himself, which speaks of Christ's powerful presence in his lives. A wonderful reminder of Christ's place along our own roads and journeys. You can find it in our hymnal, number 370. But I love this section that speaks to the omnipresence of Jesus in our life. Christ be with me. Christ with, you know what? Pick up the hymnal. It's number 370. And we're going to sing verse 6 rather than me just say this. Dr. Forster, hit it. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ within me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beside me, Christ above me, Christ in fire, Christ in danger, Christ in arms all around me, Christ in love, friend stranger. Our journey itself is the breastplate. We can walk boldly with faith despite any obstacles we may encounter along the way, precisely because Christ is behind us and before us and beside us. That's the power of the resurrection. Whether we recognize or fail to recognize the risen Christ, he is with us, just as he was with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, just as he was revealed to the disciples in the breaking of the bread. So is the risen Christ with us and revealed to each one of us.